What if the last sound you ever heard wasn't a goodbye, but your own laughter, echoing through a house that had already become your coffin? What if the clink of your glass, the beat of the music, the scream of your favorite song were nothing more than a countdown to your death? That's the reality that unfolded on a night drenched in neon lights, bass drops, and the illusion of safety. A night that was supposed to be unforgettable and was. But for reasons no one would dare to imagine, the invitations went out quietly. A private message here, a whispered word there, come through at midnight, no earlier, no later, no excuses. It wasn't strange. In fact, it was thrilling. It had become a tradition in this small town. Once every semester, the secret midnight party, a gathering where parents were asleep. Rules were irrelevant, and the night was theirs. Midnight meant rebellion. Midnight meant freedom. Midnight meant no consequences. But this time, midnight meant death. The house sat at the edge of town, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to breathe with secrets of their own. It was old, too, bones creaking like a body that had lived too long. Some swore it used to be a boarding school. Others said it was once a sanatorium. Nobody really knew, and nobody cared. That night, its windows glowed faintly against the dark, breaking like a lighthouse, but one that guided only toward Ruel. Inside, the air was thick with sweat, perfume, and alcohol. Students pressed shoulder to shoulder, dancing, losing themselves in the rhythm. Every corner buzzed with secrets, new romances forming in shadows, old grudges surfacing in drunken whispers, lies told with smiles that seemed a little too sharp. But somewhere in that crowd, hidden in plain sight, was a presence colder than the night. Outside, watching, waiting, smiling without mirth. Because while the others came for music, laughter, and escape, this one came for blood. At 11:59, the final guest stumbled in, laughter spilling out of them like the liquor in their cups. By 12 o'clock sharp, the doors slammed shut, locked windows latched, phones collected in a bowl at the entrance, screens glowing like trapped fireflies before going black. Nobody noticed, nobody cared. They were too busy living, too busy dying. The music peaked, a cheer rose, someone poured shots in the kitchen, a couple disappeared upstairs. Someone bragged loudly in the corner about sneaking in stronger booze. Normal, ordinary, harmless. Until the lights flickered. It was only for a second, just enough to make people shout, laugh nervously, call it a vibe. But when the power returned, something was different. One person was gone, and the shadow upstairs had already chosen their first victim. At first, nobody noticed. One body missing in a crowd meant nothing. The music was too loud, the drinks too strong, and the laughter too heavy. But then, a scream. It wasn't playful, it wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't one of those tipsy shrieks people let out when their favorite song plays. It was primal, raw, the kind that tears itself out of a throat when a soul realizes death has already reached out its hand. The music stopped. For the first time all night, silence filled the house. And in that silence, the truth stepped in. The missing boy was found upstairs, or rather, what was left of him. Blood painted the walls in strokes too deliberate to be random. His smile, the one that had charmed and drawn people to him all night, was carved into his skin in a grotesque parody. His body was laid out on the bed like an offering, and on the wall above him, smeared in crimson letters, were 3 chilling words: "You are next." Panic erupted. Some ran for the doors, locked. Others rushed for their phones, gone. The bowl they'd been tossed into now sat empty, mocking them. And then, as if on cue, the lights went out again. What followed was chaos in the dark. Glass shattered, feet thundered across the wooden floor. Breathing grew ragged, screams overlapped with cries for help. But through it all, something else could be heard. Low, calm, inevitable. A laugh. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, almost amused. The laugh of someone who wasn't hiding, someone who owned the night. When the lights flickered back on, another body lay crumpled near the kitchen. A girl this time. Her throat was slashed clean, but her eyes were still wide open, frozen in terror, staring at the ceiling as though she had seen something there before the knife struck. And again, the writing appeared, this time across the white kitchen tiles, Each letter is bold, drip, undeniable. One by one, fear turned to frenzy. Friends blamed each other. Couples turned on one another. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with dread. Every laugh from earlier now felt like a curse. Because if the killer was inside, if they were already locked in with them, then anyone could be next. Fear had devoured the music. The house that once pulsed with bass and laughter now shook with something darker: chaos, suspicion, betrayal. Someone screamed, "It's you! You disappeared upstairs." "No, no, I was with her the whole time." Another voice shouted, shaking, and was desperate. Finger pointing, screams, shoves. Friends who had trusted each other hours ago now stood inches apart, eyes burning with panic, ready to fight for survival. A girl clutched her boyfriend's arm. "Swear to me you didn't do this." "I swear." But her eyes didn't believe him. It was no longer a party. It was a courtroom. Every whisper became an accusation. Every glance was a knife. The killer hadn't just claimed 2 lives. They had poisoned the room itself. And that was the cruelest part. Because while the crowd tore each other apart with fear and suspicion, the real predator watched silently, hidden in plain sight. One of them, then bang, a crash echoed from the basement. Half the group bolted toward the sound, desperate for answers, desperate for an escape route. The others stayed frozen in the living room, clutching each other, praying that morning would come. But morning was never going to save them. Those who ran to the basement didn't return. Not a single one. The air grew heavy, thick with something metallic. Blood. When someone finally dared to peek down the stairwell, the steps glistened wet, red. A drip echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. And then, a voice. Soft. Male. Close. "You don't get to leave." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't panicked. It was calm, almost gentle, and that calmness was worse than any scream. Because calm meant control. Calm meant the killer wasn't afraid. The killer was enjoying this. The silence after that voice was suffocating. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then shattering glass. Someone had hurled a chair into a window. The glass cracked, split into jagged shards. But when they pushed against it, the truth hit like a blade in the gut. It wasn't ordinary glass. It was reinforced, bulletproof, the kind used in banks. Another boy rushed to the front door, muscles straining as he pulled at the knob. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. The hinges groaned, but then his hands froze. Nailed, shut, from the outside. And that's when reality crashed in. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just a party gone wrong. It was a cage. Every entrance is sealed. Every escape locked. Every single one of them funneled exactly where the killer wanted them. Someone sobbed. Someone screamed. And then something worse. The lights flickered again, plunging the house into near darkness. This time, when they came back on, the decorations, the silly streamers, the balloons, the banners looked different. No, not different. Revealed. The red glow of the emergency lights lit them like wounds, and they saw the truth. Each streamer wasn't just hanging at random. It was placed, deliberate, lining the walls in shapes that spelled out words. One girl whispered it aloud, her voice trembling, "Welcome home." And that was when they understood. They hadn't just been invited to a party. They had been lured into a ritual. The house no longer felt like walls and wood. It felt alive, breathing, watching. Every shadow stretched to far. Every creak of the floor was louder than it should have been. And then it began. A single knock, soft, precise. At the basement door, everyone froze. The knock came again, louder, sharper. And then a voice, distorted, almost playful. "Hide. Let's play." The lights died. Screams tore through the air as people scattered like mice in a burning maze. Some ran upstairs, slamming doors behind them. Others darted into closets, under tables, into bathrooms, choking on their own sobs. The house fell into a deadly rhythm. Knock, scream, silence. One boy hid in a bedroom closet, holding his breath. His heart beat so loud, it felt like a drum. He thought he was safe until he noticed something carved into the wood above his head. Fresh words, scratched deep. I see you. The doorknob turned slowly. Downstairs, two girls crouched beneath the kitchen counter, clutching each other so tightly their fingernails dug into skin. The silence dragged on, until a knife scraped against the tiles. Step, step, step. The sound drew closer, but they couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The killer didn't even speak, didn't even rush. They wanted them to listen, to feel, to drown in fear before the blade ever touched them. Upstairs, another group huddled in the bathroom. One whispered prayers, another sobbed. Then, from the shower curtain behind them, a laugh. Low, steady, wrong. The curtain ripped open. Blood hit the walls. The hunt wasn't chaos. It was orchestrated, one by one, like pieces in a game. The killer plucked them from their hiding spots. And through it all, a single truth became undeniable. The killer didn't just want them dead. The killer wanted them to know that every step, every hiding place, every scream had already been planned. The girl was the last one left. Her breaths came ragged, sharp, tearing at her throat like glass. The living room, once filled with music and laughter, was now a graveyard. Balloons deflated and dragged across the sticky, blood-soaked floor. The disco lights flickered weakly, turning every shadow into a phantom. And then, silence. The killer stepped forward, boots slow against the floorboards, a mask catching the faintest glow, hiding everything, revealing nothing. She backed away, shaking, her hands slick with blood. That wasn't hers. Why us? She whispered, her voice already breaking. The killer tilted their head, pausing like a predator toying with prey. And then came the whisper, soft, deliberate, unforgettable. Because midnight needed company. The knife rose. One final scream ripped through the house. And then nothing. When police finally arrived the next morning, they didn't find survivors. Only corpses, twisted in grotesque displays, as though death itself had been choreographed. Every phone, every camera, every shred of evidence, gone. The basement, a slaughterhouse. The attic, a shrine to madness. And on the living room wall, written in blood so fresh, it still dripped. The party isn't over, but the most haunting detail wasn't the bodies. It was the absence. No sign of the killer, no mask, no footsteps leaving the house. It was as if the murderer had vanished into the air itself, leaving only silence in their wake. And so the whispers began, about the midnight killer, about the parties that end in blood, about the laughter that becomes screams before the music stops. Some swore they'd seen someone watching from the woods that night. Others claimed they heard the sound of faint laughter, echoing long after the police had left. But one thing everyone agreed on was this: the killer hadn't finished. Because in towns across the country, at parties where music peaks and lights flicker, people swear they've seen it. A shadow at the window, a figure in the corner, a whisper in the dark. Midnight needed company. And when you hear that whisper, it's already too late. The midnight party wasn't just a massacre, it was an invitation. And the question is, when the next clock strikes 12, whose party will it be? So subscribe now before the next scream belongs to you.